Netflix's most expensive movie ever is here, and it's a monumental disaster. When he got his first glimpse of a movie studio, Orson Welles excitedly proclaimed it the biggest electric train set any boy ever had. But with a reported budget of more than $300 million, Joe and Anthony Russo's The Electric State makes Welles' train set look like a busted caboose. The most expensive movie in Netflix's history, it's also among the costliest of all time, joining a list that includes the brothers' own Avengers, Infinity War and Avengers: Endgame. If the Russos are the most profligate creators in history, their Amazon series Citadel is also one of the most expensive TV shows ever made. They're among the most successful too. Endgame and Infinity War grossed nearly $5 billion in movie theaters alone. And yet, for all the money they're making, and all that they're allowed to spend, they don't seem to be enjoying themselves very much. The Electric State certainly wants you to think you're having a good time. Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who, with the exception of the typographically doomed Sherry, have written all of the Russos' movies since 2014's Captain America, The Winter Soldier, populate their world, an alternate mid-1990s in which labor-saving robots have been a fact of life for nearly 4 decades, with a range of quirky machines. From animatronic popcorn buckets to a chatty barbershop chair that keeps pestering Chris Pratt's shaggy meta head to submit to a haircut. Although the story is set mostly in the aftermath of a war between humanity and robots that cost countless lives, the tone is consistently, even aggressively, chipper. Humans themselves generally stay at home, puppeteering mechanized exoskeletons they can manipulate from afar through a primitive version of the internet. Every character speaks in the same quippy, sarcastic patter, and their jokes are double underlined, first by another character's shocked response, then by the original speaker's smug "yeah, I said that" smirk. A common complaint with modern mega-budget movies is that it's impossible to tell where the money went. Watching the Russos' nondescript Netflix action thriller The Gray Man, for example, it's easy to look at its washed-out colors and uninspired set pieces and think, $200 million for that? The Electric State at least looks expensive. Much of the story takes place in the an arid chunk of the American Southwest that has been turned into a reservation for the defeated robot survivors, where hundreds of intricately designed and meticulously realized sentient devices have gathered in an abandoned shopping mall. There are massive battles in which cars collide with skyscrapers several stories up, and below ground there's a cavernous lair filled with black market memorabilia. In the post-conflict 90s, G.I. Joe lunchboxes have suddenly become valuable contraband. And yet the movie suffers from a constant lack, not of resources but of imagination, of inspiration, of, to put it simply, fun. There are plenty of things in the Electric State that ought to be fun, like the revelation that the Robot Uprising's leader was a familiar commercial mascot, a human-sized legume with a top hat and monocle. But when we're informed that Mr. Peanut signed the Treaty of Surrender with President Clinton, there's no wink at the underlying absurdity, just a flat recitation of fact. In the movie's reality, self-governing robots were first realized by Walt Disney in 1955 as a theme park attraction, and they retain an element of mid-century kitsch, but we never get a chance to linger on the darkly humorous implication that untold thousands of human soldiers must have met death at the hands of an ambulatory donut or homicidal payphone. The story cries out for some of Paul Verhoeven's consumerist satire, but instead the Russos have chosen to play it as Spielberg, or, more specifically, like the cut-rate Spielberg imitations that clogged multiplexes in the 1980s after E.T.'s runaway success had the studios scrambling to keep up. Its villains, a monomaniac tech mogul, Stanley Tucci, and a bloodthirsty general, Giancarlo Esposito, are like a child's imagined version of what their parents do at work, inhabiting vacant, generic spaces that tell us nothing about who they are or what they represent. For most of the Electric State, we're stuck following Michelle, Millie Bobby Brown, a rebellious teenage foster kid who lost her entire family in a car crash just before the war. For reasons Marcus and McFeely's script can't be bothered to explain, Michelle becomes convinced that her younger brother somehow survived the accident and is remotely controlling the movements of a robot named Cosmo, a grinning, metallic humanoid with a Bob's Big